Imagine playing a game where the ultimate prize, the one mystical weapon you desperately need to survive, actually mutates your body.
Oh man,
You know,
yeah.
like every single time you use it to save your life, your bones lengthen, your mass increases, and your customized armor, it just slowly suffocates you while you navigate these really tight underground caves.
It's pure body horror. You're forced to choose between dying by a monster's hand or literally growing yourself to death just stuck in a subterranean tunnel.
Right. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are so thrilled to have you with us because today your mission is to explore a true holy grail of gaming history.
We really are. We're cracking open a dossier on a legendary, totally unpublished 1982 tabletop tournament series.
The Dwarven quest for the Rod of Seven Parts.
Exactly. And this specific dossier covers modules R7 through R10, which debuted at the Gen Con East 2 convention.
Okay, let's unpack this because, we are going on a journey through some bizarre mechanics, massive Hollywood corporate pivots, and, like we said, a magical artifact that fundamentally punished the people who wielded it.
It really did. It was an adventure path written by designer Frank Mentzer that just pushed the absolute limits of player cooperation, dungeon design, and, honestly, psychological warfare.
But the crazy thing is this manuscript was never officially polished, right? Like it was never adapted for retail publication.
Yeah, no, it exists today solely as a stack of fading dot matrix printouts and these crude maps in the private collections of a few sworn tournament judges.
Wow. But to really grasp why this raw, unpolished manuscript changed the entire DNA of role-playing games, we kind of need to put you in the mindset of the early 1980s.
Right, because the whole philosophy of what a game was supposed to actually be was just, well, shifting under everyone's feet.
Exactly. If you look at Advanced Dungeons & Dragons in 1982, the medium was in this profound transition. It was trying to evolve away from its chaotic, kind of improvisational wargaming roots.
Yeah, the creators were moving toward a much more highly codified, mathematically rigorous system. The core rulebooks had just been published to standardize all the mechanics.
But there was this massive disconnect, right, between the books and how the game was actually being played out at large conventions.
A huge disconnect. Because before this era, the standard for a tournament module was essentially an exercise in sadism.
Oh, absolutely. Like Gary Gygax's infamous Tomb of Horrors from the late 70s.
Yeah.
The community literally called them killer dungeons.
Right. The designer's goal wasn't to tell a collaborative story with you. It was just to murder your character using these completely illogical traps.
You didn't survive by being a smart tactical squad. You survived by, like, slowly crawling down a hallway, poking every single stone tile with a 10-foot pole.
Because the dungeon master running the game was actively, openly trying to destroy you, it was an inherently adversarial relationship.
And Frank Mentzer, the author of our dossier, he recognized that this hostile dynamic was basically a dead end for the hobby's growth.
Yeah, he knew it had to change, so to fix it, he founded the Role Playing Game Association, or the RPGA, in 1981. His vision was to establish this universal standard of excellence across the whole country.
So a magic spell cast at a table in Wisconsin would work exactly the same way, with the exact same rulings as that spell cast in New York.
Precisely. But achieving that required completely standardizing competitive play.
It makes me think of a neighborhood playground game. Like for years, the kids have been playing this wild, chaotic game where the neighborhood referee just makes up rules on the fly, changes gravity, messes with everyone for cheap laughs.
Yeah, just total chaos.
And then suddenly, that referee blows a whistle, pulls out a clipboard and says, "All right, we are now a highly regulated Olympic sport. Here is the rubric." The metrics for success just completely changed overnight.
That's a perfect analogy. And what's fascinating here is how that shift fundamentally altered the scoring system of the game, which, radically altered player psychology.
Because in the 1970s, tournament advancement was purely objective and mostly destructive.
Right, you counted up the gold pieces you looted and tallied up the hit dice of the monsters you killed. Hit dice basically being a measurement of a monster's weight class or toughness.
It rewarded what historians call the murder hobo mentality. You kick down the door, kill everything inside, take the treasure, and move on.
Exactly. But the new RPGA system evaluated players on entirely different criteria. They completely threw out the gold in the body count.
Oh, wow. So what did they judge you on?
Suddenly, you were judged on role-playing, rules knowledge, and cooperation. It went from a strict mathematical tally of destruction to a subjective democratic vote by your peers at the table and the judge.
You were suddenly being rewarded for, like, complex diplomacy, tactical restraint, and teamwork. That is a massive pivot.
It is. And designing an adventure to test those specific subjective metrics requires a completely different architectural approach.
Because if your goal is to test a group of strangers on their ability to cooperate and roleplay under pressure, you can't just drop them in a square room with a dragon and see who rolls the highest damage.
Exactly. You have to build a psychological crucible. You have to engineer situations that force teamwork. And that's exactly what Mentzer built with the sequence of R7 through R10.
Let's talk about the actual mechanics of that crucible, because looking at the notes on these encounters, it is wild what they put these players through.
Whoa, it's brutal. Mentzer didn't just write a linear story. He created an escalating series of psychological tests.
Make the very first section in Module R7, the Fiery Fortress.
Yeah.
He starts by attacking that old murder hobo instinct directly, right?
Yeah, the Fiery Fortress was designed as the ultimate filter for the tournament. It was engineered to teach players a very hard, very immediate lesson tactical retreat.
Which players hated doing.
Right. Mentzer flooded the fortress with overwhelming, unbeatable forces. If your group tried to hack and slash your way through it like the old days, you failed the tournament round entirely.
It was a pure test to see if you had the discipline to know when to run away. And then once he broke them of that habit, he tested their spatial reasoning.
Force Fountain, still in R7.
Yes. This isn't just a dungeon. It's a three-dimensional vertical shaft mapped entirely around the eruption cycle of a massive scalding geyser.
Just try to picture that. Put yourself in the shoes of a player in 1982. You are mapping this out on physical graph paper at a folding table.
You're trying to calculate vertical drops and time your movements to avoid being boiled alive by steam eruptions. It sounds like an absolute logistical nightmare.
The cartography required to navigate that space was incredibly sophisticated for the era. Mentzer was forcing players to think in 3 dimensions and manage time as a strict, depleting resource.
He basically exhausted them mentally and physically before they even drew their weapons. And once they survived the spatial puzzle, he threw them into a psychological one with Module R8.
Ah, Module R8.
I have to point out the title of R8 because it's brilliant. It's called Yogg's Dessert. And for decades, archivers and fans thought dessert spelled with 2 S's was just a typo for a sandy desert.
Right, but it's actually a deliberate, whimsical pun by Mentzer. The module doesn't take place in a sandy wasteland at all. It's a sprawling island castle in the middle of a lake.
There is 0 sand. The players themselves are the dessert.
Yeah, Mentzer used that dry humor to soften the edges of these incredibly brutal environments. But the joke hides a deeply frustrating mechanic.
Because inside that castle, the piece of the magical artifact they need is unstable, right? It's actively phasing in and out of reality.
Exactly. It creates massive spatial and temporal anomalies. Corridors loop back on themselves, time dilates, and the party has to navigate an environment where the basic laws of physics are totally unreliable.
Okay, so if R7 tests restraint and spatial reasoning, and R8 tests their grip on reality, how does he test pure forced cooperation?
That brings us to R9, Tinker's Canyon, and the whiplash here is severe.
It really is. You start outside in a massive open-air battle against heavily armored red dragons. You have room to maneuver.
But then the environment abruptly funnels you underground into these cramped, claustrophobic caves.
You're dealing with magical guardian maidens popping out of stone pillars.
Yeah.
And then you hit my favorite encounter in the entire dossier, the rogue flesh golem.
The recharging golem encounter is just a masterclass in forcing diverse character classes to synergize.
Exactly. Because you expect a major boss fight to be a majestic monster, but instead it's essentially Frankenstein's monster, actively clinging to a massive metal staff that is pumping it full of electricity.
And the players have to physically disconnect the monster from its power source while surviving its attacks.
And the punchline, that electrical staff is the battery, and it's holding the artifact piece they need inside of it. They literally have to break open the live battery to get the prize.
Think about how that specifically tests the RPGA cooperation metric. You can't just hit the golem with swords because it's healing. You have to coordinate.
Right, the physically strong characters have to wrestle the monster away from the staff, taking immense damage.
While the magically inclined characters figure out how to short-circuit or break the staff without electrocuting the entire team, it's a highly lethal physical puzzle that demands perfect communication.
Which perfectly escalates the tension before throwing out the rulebook entirely for the final module, R10. It's titled Airplane, which is another amazing movie pun referencing the 1980s slapstick comedy.
The title bluntly signals that terrestrial rules no longer apply. The entire adventure shifts to the elemental plane of air.
You are dealing with gravityless combat, floating in an infinite sky, engaging in intense diplomacy with a genie vizier in a donut-shaped city.
It's wild. And this leads to the climax, the final showdown against the rival artifact seeker, an undead lich named Tlaziel.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I want to push back on this design choice for a second.
Oh, sure.
The dossier notes that if the players try to outsmart the entire final scenario by using a wish spell, say, from a captured genie to just teleport away with the artifact, Tlaziel uses his own wish spell to intercept theirs, cancel it out, and force a final battle anyway.
He does, yeah.
Doesn't intercepting a player's perfectly legal wish drag us right back to the old killer dungeon mentality?
Yeah.
Isn't that just the designer being antagonistic and saying no to player creativity?
I can see why you'd think that. It is a delicate line that adventure designers constantly walk, but in the context of this specific tournament, it operates differently.
How so?
Well, Tlaziel isn't just a static monster waiting in a final room for the heroes to arrive. He is an active, intelligent participant in the world. Throughout the entire R7 to R10 sequence, he uses scrying magic, essentially magical espionage, like tapping their phones to spy on the party's tactics.
So he knows their playbook.
Precisely. So when he counters their wish spell, it's the culmination of a sophisticated metatextual battle of wits between the players and the designer.
It's framed as dueling ninth-level reality-altering magic.
Right. It pushes the RPGA rules knowledge metric to its absolute breaking point. It asks the players, how do you tactically outmaneuver a genius opponent who has access to the exact same reality-breaking tools that you do?
That reframes it completely. It's not a trapdoor unfairly falling on your head.
Yeah.
It's a chess match where the opponent can also move the pieces.
Exactly.
But surviving all of these bizarre environments wasn't just about where you were fighting. It was about who you were forced to be and the terrifying object you had to carry with you.
The asymmetrical warfare of the pre-generated party is perhaps the most defining feature of this tournament.
Because in a normal home campaign, you spend months, maybe years, building a custom character. You choose their skills, their magic, their gear.
But to enforce a level playing field at this convention, you were handed a rigidly designed team, a party of exactly 5 dwarves and exactly 1 fragile human magic user.
And remember, we are talking about first edition rules here. In first edition, dwarves could not cast spells, period. They were entirely martial, physical fighters.
Right. Stripping the party of broad, versatile spellcasting fundamentally shifted how players approached every problem. In a normal game, if you encounter a chasm, a wizard casts a flight spell.
Here, 5 out of the 6 players have to rely purely on tactical positioning, ropes, and physical endurance.
And the lone human magic user became a profoundly high-value, incredibly fragile asset.
It's the ultimate high-stakes VIP escort mission, like in a modern video game. The 5 Dwarven players had to act as a literal physical meat shield to protect their one spellcaster.
They had to save the wizard's few precious spell slots for absolute emergencies because the dwarves had no magical utility of their own.
Imagine sitting at a convention table with 5 strangers and instantly having to gel into a cohesive military unit just to keep one player alive.
It operationalized the cooperation metric perfectly. By restricting their individual freedom, Mentzer forced them to work together.
But the true genius and the true horror of this design was the MacGuffin itself. Right, the rod of 7 parts.
Yes. Unlike commercial adventures that treated artifacts as simple, helpful, magical boons, Mentzer's rod was an active, hostile antagonist that the players had to carry in their own pockets.
Let's talk about the mechanics of this artifact, because it is wild how punishing it is. First off, as you collect the pieces, they naturally attract and snap together.
But what if you try to take them apart to hide them, or distribute them among the party so you aren't carrying all your eggs in one basket?
You have to make a save versus death roll with a massive -5 penalty. For those unfamiliar, a save versus death is a literal roll of the dice, where if you fail, you don't just take damage or go unconscious, your character instantly drops dead.
No second chances. You risk instant, irrevocable death just for trying to disassemble the thing.
And once you commit to wielding the connected pieces, you are effectively chained to it. And utilizing its defensive powers came with a terrible, permanent physiological cost.
Right. If you use the rod's gas protection power or its tongue spell power to understand a language, it permanently alters your character's physical statistics.
Every single time you invoke those powers to save your life, the wielder permanently grows 3 inches in height and gains 15 pounds in weight.
Which sounds like a funny quirk at first, until you think about the physical reality of a dwarf in a subterranean dungeon.
It creates an immense creeping logistical nightmare. If your dwarf suddenly gains 15 pounds of mass, their highly customized expensive plate armor ceases to fit.
Their magical rings become too tight and cut off circulation. And remember the environment of Module R9, Tinker's Canyon.
Oh, right. They eventually have to navigate narrow, claustrophobic subterranean corridors. Being taller and wider becomes a deadly liability.
You could literally grow yourself into getting wedged in a cave and dying. It's absolute body horror.
And if you manage to complete the artifact by putting all 7 pieces together, it gets so much worse. It forces a permanent, unalterable alignment shift to chaotic neutral.
That means your character's foundational moral compass is forcefully rewritten against your will. You go from being a heroic team player to completely unpredictable.
You become mentally unwilling to ever let go of the rod. Oh, and connecting it permanently drains one experience level. You lose hard-earned progress.
And if you dare to use its ultimate powers, like shape-changing to survive a boss fight, you risk further immediate level drains every single time you trigger it.
This specific punishing mechanic is what created such immense replayability and varied experiences across the different convention tables, right?
Totally. You had groups who approached the artifact with completely different philosophies.
Some players were pragmatists. They actively abused the artifact's powers to steamroll the monsters, willingly taking the catastrophic level drains and the body mutations.
Because they knew their stats would magically reset before the next round of the tournament began.
Power gamers, figuring out the meta of the tournament structure.
Exactly that. But other groups engaged deeply with the role-playing aspect and treated the rod as completely radioactive.
They refused to touch its powers, attempting to survive these grueling, reality-bending modules, relying solely on their mundane dwarven axes and sheer grit.
Just to avoid the physical mutations and spiritual corruption. It was a brilliant psychological experiment disguised as a game mechanic.
It really is a masterclass in design. It pioneered the multi-module adventure path, taking players through a connected, epic narrative.
It integrated pre-generated characters deep into the plot years before massively popular series like Dragonlance made that concept famous.
It operationalized decades of deep world-building lore. So the obvious question is, why was it lost? Why did the publisher, TSR, lock this away in a vault instead of putting money with it at retail?
Well, it comes down to corporate pivoting and the realities of a rapidly expanding business in the 1980s.
Right.
The tournament was originally designed to be the grand launchpad for Frank Mentzer's highly detailed Acquaria campaign setting. It was going to be an entirely new, fleshed-out hemisphere of the existing Greyhawk globe known as the Acquaria setting.
A massive world expansion.
A monumental undertaking. But by 1983, the creator of Dungeons & Dragons, Gary Gygax, had relocated to Hollywood.
He was out there co-producing the D&D Saturday morning cartoon, which became a massive cultural hit, and trying to negotiate feature film deals.
Right, so he was no longer providing day-to-day creative oversight at TSR headquarters back in Wisconsin.
And when the cat's away in Hollywood trying to make movies, the corporate executives pivot the strategy back home.
Exactly. Without Gygax championing the expansion of the Greyhawk universe, TSR executives shifted all of their massive corporate resources into developing a brand new multimedia franchise from scratch.
Dragonlance.
Yes, Dragonlance. They wanted books, calendars, and modules all tied to one new intellectual property.
Which, to be fair, was a runaway historic success. But it meant the Acquaria setting was totally orphaned.
The R7 to R10 modules were abandoned. And the physical reality of these documents today is just wild.
They only exist as raw, unpolished dot matrix printouts, typewritten pages with hand-drawn edits, and crude isometric maps shoved into aging manila folders held by former RPGA judges.
It's tragic in a way.
So what does this all mean for us today? Because massive corporate entities still own this intellectual property. Do they have an ethical obligation to preserve and digitize these lost foundational texts for the public record? Or are we just romanticizing what are basically unpolished, broken drafts with only nostalgic value?
This raises an important question, and it's one that historians and archivists hotly debate. On one hand, these manuscripts are the connective tissue of modern game design. Hiding them obscures the evolution of the medium.
So on
the other hand, they were strictly functional documents, never intended for commercial consumption. And this actually connects to another major philosophical debate among game historians regarding this specific era of design,
Which is?
the concept of railroading.
Ah, railroading. That's a huge term in tabletop gaming.
Huh.
It's when players feel like their choices don't actually matter because the story is on a fixed, unchangeable track, like a train.
We touched on this earlier with the pre-generated dwarves restricting player freedom.
Precisely. The entire R7 through R10 sequence locked players into those pre-generated characters, forced them through specific, inescapable environmental funnels like the geyser or the flesh golem room.
And it demanded they achieve a single objective within a strict real-world time limit. Critics of this style argue that this tournament structure inherently removes player autonomy.
Stripping away the open-world sandbox freedom that defined early role-playing.
But defenders of Mentzer's design counter that this tight, uncompromising control is simply a superior framework for delivering cohesive cinematic storytelling.
Without those strict constraints, the intricate pacing, the forced cooperation, and the sheer narrative urgency of the Dwarven quest simply wouldn't work.
It's the eternal tension between total sandbox freedom and a beautifully curated narrative experience.
So let's bring this all together. We started by looking for a lost artifact locked in a corporate vault, and what we found was the actual blueprint for the modern adventure path.
We found a convention packet printed on a noisy .matrix printer that somehow managed to test the absolute limits of player cooperation, spatial resource management, and tactical restraint.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, for any learner out there who loves exploring multiple perspectives, the story of R7 through R10 perfectly encapsulates the tension between individual power and collective survival.
Mentzer designed a brilliant scenario where you simply could not win alone, and where the very tool you needed to succeed was constantly threatening to destroy you.
It's a profound exploration of the fine line between an empowering tool and a corrupting burden.
It really is. And it leaves you wondering how you would have handled it, sitting at that folding table with 5 strangers in 1982, staring at a piece of graph paper.
So we'll leave you with this final thought to mull over. Think about the physical mechanics of the rod of 7 parts.
Yeah.
If the ultimate tool you need to survive actively mutates your body to the point where your own armor no longer fits, at what point does the very instrument of your salvation become the architect of your destruction?